Well, thanks for that kind introduction. And probably the reason why I travel so much is just because I really like to explore and see new design disciplines, really. And for me, when I started, and what we'll talk about today is lessons I learned. I called it the International Design Walkabout after my PhD. And during this time, I wanted to search for where design was changing and merging with new fields, but also I had come to a point after my design PhD that I had been in Newcastle for too long in the Northeast. I had done my undergraduate and my PhD, and I really wanted to really explore what was out in the world and how it was changing. And so I really wanted to kind of explore and see. So this is why I'm going to talk today about my kind of global explorations into design research. And so I kind of lived the transitions as design was changing as I was going to different design agencies. But it wasn't good enough. If I was going to do this after my PhD and I was going to go to different practices, I felt I needed to kind of share it in some way. That wasn't just I was just doing it for my kind of personal benefit. That was, for me, it also have to be a higher purpose to what you do. And I don't know whether that's the higher purpose or anything, maybe. Doesn't. I can't escape, okay. So my friend Joyce Yee, she had been a brilliant mentor through my PhD, and she said, let's write a book called How Design's Changing, but it slowly emerged into calling it Design Transitions. And for me, I said, no, I've just wrote my PhD. I don't want any more kind of academic writing at all. No, I will not do this. But slowly but surely, I had a lot of conversations with London design companies, and I realised all the time their practices were changing. And for me, it was interesting to capture this moment in time, how, and in the book what we've done is capture this moment where it's changing and merging with so many spaces, and as they're kind of interacting with each other, we don't know where the practices are actually going to go, which is quite exciting, I would say. So I actually then asked another person to come along on the book, which was Lauren Tan. So we were kind of three ladies on a mission to capture this kind of global insight into how design was changing. And today, bringing it back to you, this is an unconference, and I really want to kind of get your view, because I never went to Germany. I'm in Germany now, but I never went to Germany. And I want to get your view about how you see design changing. So at the end of this talk, and I'll show you how I want to do it, is I want you to kind of think about who design research is in Germany. And I can give you this global perspective, but for you it's relevant that you kind of understand who you are now and these possible futures. So I don't know, you said I asked hard questions, but how would you do this? Okay, so there's a lot of things going on about how you predict the future and how you look into it. And Nesta, which is innovation charity in the UK, they use this model of looking into it, and it's also come from stats, so if anyone's from a stat background. And so what I'll do and what I'll take you through is the different places I went on my walkabout, and I'll give you some insights, and then I'll kind of summarise with different who design research is now, and I'll take you through these different ways of looking at the future. And if you want to, you can sketch down your own interpretation as I'm talking. And I always like to draw, because it makes sense for me to draw. And so the proven future here is what is already going on, what's likely to happen in the future. And the preferable future, I would say, is something that you believe should happen in the future. Plausible is a bit more broad, and the possible future is we don't know. So we don't know what's going to happen in the future, so we've got to kind of see what that looks like. So I'll end this talk with this, but if you've got some ideas, I'll ask you to share them back at the end. So, okay. So I was starting this international design walkabout, and where do you start when you start a walkabout? And what I did was I created the Hitchhiker's Guide to Design Research, and it was just a Google map. And I started to look, and actually what I found in the agency side is that they're all quite hidden. There's actually no map, there's no collective where you would find them. And I think that says something probably about us as a discipline, that sometimes it's hidden to other people. And this map became, I don't know, it became a way of people started to kind of engage with it and add to it, and still do email me to say, can we be on the map? But it's just a map. So. And when I was starting the walkabout, I knew that if I was going to different companies, that I really just couldn't say, hey, I'm a design researcher. Can you hire me? That wouldn't work. So for my design PhD research, I'd been using metaphors to help people think and talk about their design process. So through going to London, I was trying to work out what offer could I actually make to these companies. And I think this is important for if you're an academic trying to work with industry, that you've got to work out what is your offer. And for me, at that point, to do this, I created the Design Doctors. And I wanted to, through conversations with different people in London, I found out they had no time to reflect on their practices. They were always changing, constantly changing. And actually, the use of helping people take that time out and reflect on what they do was really, really important to them, and getting everyone aligned on what that, first of all, just what that design process would actually look and feel like. We don't actually look at our design process as a customer experience. So on a basic level, we should always be designing our experience of that design process, because sometimes it does get a bit hairy near the end when you're going through it. So that was really my starting point, and I just started small and said, look, I can do this for you, but I can do research and I can be a designer. And for me, it started off some kind of interesting conversations, but I always knew, I don't know whether you've seen Simon Sinek's Start With Why. I always knew I had to kind of keep it to what I'm interested in, and what the belief of what I have is helping people use their creativity to better themselves and others, because that helps people come together and align on the future. So it's something I'm still doing now, and helping teams strengthen what they do, and help them manage change, because as I said, practices are always changing. So Walkabout started, and as I said, I was trying to explore where I had value to this professional world on a global context. And for me, looking back now, and I didn't realise this when I said if serendipity was a religion, I would probably follow it. But, I started, and first opportunity to go was with Design Thinkers in the Netherlands. And I learnt about applying design research in a business context. Then I went over to Brazil, and I learnt about, they wanted to develop some social innovation, a platform there. And because they were just passionate, if you've ever met a Brazilian, they're passionate about people and helping people. So that was their passion. So I went with them to run design thinking workshops on a social side, and then went to Idiom, and with Dreamin and Idiom, and they're the largest multidisciplinary team in India, and they do amazing things, and we'll talk about that. So there's all these contexts that I was starting to kind of explore, but I never knew where I was going to go next. So it was only once I was in one country. Then 10 days later, at the end of it, I started to kind of have different conversations, and but it took some time to build up these relationships to go and work with these companies, because you kind of do become part of their team, and still am part of some of their teams. So design thinkers. This was when they just started and moved into their studios. And this was in 2011 when I went to join them. And they are, as it says here, they're a design-driven innovation group, and they help organisations transition traditionally from a product to a service. And if you've ever helped a company or understand, like, when transitioning to a product to a service, actually, you have to then start looking inside the organisation, and because you have to bring everyone together to design this service, whereas before a product wasn't like that, and it starts to change people's business models. So all of these steps, they kind of start to help train with service design, then start to help and develop that culture to enable service and put a better foundation in for their innovation. So they're really privileged to go and work with them, because what I had seen was they were always experimenting with their processes and their practices. And I got the opportunity to work with them because Aho University had sponsored this, sponsored working with 4 organisations in Norway to introduce them to service design. So that's what I'll talk you through, some of the examples of working with them. So one of the workshops we did do was with an insurance company. And this insurance company wanted to look at the journey of the migrant workers. And for me, we just asked, this is an insurance guy standing on a chair, and he's Norwegian as well. So to try and get them to kind of relax and tell their stories and have a good conversation, at the end of it, looking at these migrant workers, we were able to identify quite quickly what were the key insights. And it wasn't fair enough when you are a migrant worker, which you go in and you have to try and access services, but actually some of the insights were, when you become Norwegian is when you have children. And when you have children, you have to access all of these services. So insurance became a good part of that, but because they had built this community up with the insurance company, they basically had a user group to try and work with them and develop the services. But we worked with another insurance company, and they were doing this work too late. They had done a life planner, but we found out that no one actually plans their lives. So we found out that, and no one trusts insurance companies. So what that told them was we were teaching them a different way and a different approaches of engaging with people in their innovation approach that was more setting the foundation for the next projects. Okay. Similarly, we worked with a telecommunication company, and what was interesting about them is they wanted to become more customer-centric. And I don't know what that means, but for them, we had to try and explore that with them. And they wanted an example of a service that they could do this with it. And what we found out, obviously, through doing this workshop is they wanted to redesign just the billing process of what they do. And that billing process, obviously it's the end of the service, but actually it's probably the most important part of the service, because that's what you get regularly. It's a regular touch point for you. And to actually redesign that to become a real-time bill, so you know what you're actually spending as you're going along. So for them, it changed this relationship. This is what kind of summarises the workshop. We had a visualiser in. And before, if the bill's not transparent, you're kind of in control of the customer. Okay? But when it shifts to this kind of new world where it's customer-centric, the actual person and the bill, it changes the relationship, so the customer's in charge. I don't know whether that's the right relationship. It should be probably made more even, but that was kind of the result of their shifting mindsets to not just think about themselves, but to think about all of the stakeholders involved. And just the last one I'll go quickly over, because this was a postal company. And what I found quite easily through working with RNF from design thinkers is that obviously the question they always ask is never the question. So they were asking this question that they were not the only ones in the market anymore, and they really wanted to realise how they can benefit from the change. But actually, taking them back to a point of just looking at the values that they actually have with the people that they work with, came out as the key values for designing such a service would be love, trust, and information. And we changed this question to more kind of a human-centred question in a sense. So that was, how do we create value for all stakeholders by empowering the customer? So we took kind of these new values and looked at this parcel journey. So it wasn't the user journey, we put the parcel in the middle and who was involved with that. But one thing I would say that really stood out for me is that they had forgotten their why. Okay? And when we asked them, but why do you do what you do? They said, this is what they got to in the end, and would be why people would want to still use their service. So we are proud to be Scandinavian, and it's part of our international heritage and identity. And as I said before, in the last company, no one trusted companies, but actually still people did trust this company. So, and we want to add value to people's lives. So it became much more of a human-centred, this is why we do what we do. So a personal learning I got from working with applying design research and different tools and so forth in large organisations is from an academic's mindset. There's always a plan, and you put the plan into action and you stick to it. I know my PhD was always retrospective, but you tell it in the way that it's always been planned. So, for me, in the practitioner's world, we always had like one plan, but to actually, when you start to enter these workshops, to see and evolve, that you're always looking for a better plan, a better conversation that you can have with all stakeholders in order for that service to be customer-centric or to be better for their employees as well. And what I learned about applying design research in a business context is it was really quick. Once you got everyone in the room, set that context to find these key insights that actually would change how you would perceive delivering that service, and also aligning people on that common purpose, that why and their values, was just so important. And a lot of conversations I think I learnt through there was that value mapping and having, what is the value? Like, why do you do research? What is the value of it? Having these kind of key questions right at the start of the process and making sure you keep with that, because value is not something that I give you value. Have you got value? It's not something that you have really. It's happens through the process, and you start to learn how you do it, so you have to prototype as well. And the last one, it was this shift in power balance within the companies and what their mindset had to shift to go forward. So the next company was Voil, and Voil were in the situation in Brazil. So they were from an interaction design background, but they wanted to shift into being design thinking. And they wanted me to come over to help them with this social innovation platform that they called Mosaico. And they just knew that they had to start it somehow. So they were arranging workshops. We were doing one. We got there, and I was helping them look at that strategy side of things to help them look at what Mosaico would be, who would it benefit, why you do what you do. And because they had such a passion, and it was just trying to get that out and frame it in a way that would be valuable to them. And so we came up with this question that we would start with, and which is, how can we help our local community solve the problems that really matter to them? I think that's relevant in an academic context, and it's relevant in a practitioner's context. If you can, I think, obviously design research, there's a lot of been more locally focused as well. And I know sometimes there's a group in Leeds, and they're now just saying, well, we do this, and they're trying to engage with their local community to solve healthcare problems and work with councils. And so going back to this Voil context, they just wanted to travel around Brazil and really work out the problems that mattered to people there, starting in their hometown of Belo Horizonte. So I said the first context was in Belo Horizonte, and I took them through a 2-day workshop of, first of all, we were going out, listening to the problems, looking at the daily lives of people, getting people to capture it. I never went out with them because I can't speak Portuguese. I did try, and I'm sorry I couldn't speak any German. So, so we went. So then they came back, but they were so enthusiastic from actually just going and talking to people. And the different people in the workshops were governments, were entrepreneurs, were designers wanting to change, and wanting to change how they engage with people. And design thinking in Brazil at that time, there was a lot of education. So in the emerging markets, there's a lot of education about shifting the perspectives of what design thinking can do. So we were just doing it with the workshops. So we were looking at these problems that really did matter. And hygiene was an issue for people on the streets. Isolation, culture and family, access to education, because education's not free there. Traffic systems, everyone in Brazil complains about traffic all the time. And flavalinhas, which is informal jobs, and communities. So these were really like what was really wanting them to change. And for me, we looked at these and we started to kind of see and explore them, and look at just finding these kind of key questions that they could then explore and take and prototype a service in 2 days. So some of the things that they wanted to kind of create was sharing skills in public spaces informally, and they wanted to provide education on transportation, because they were always on transportation and bus rides. And one wanted to look at the whole ecosystem of a market to see how we can take the waste that they were producing and change it. But a lot of things, for me, I did learn through doing these workshops, and I knew I couldn't, when I was analysing the data, I had to have someone who was Brazilian there to help me analyse this, because I don't understand their context. I can facilitate and I can educate them on how to do this themselves, but I don't. Flavalinhas, fair enough, I'd seen them on the streets, but I don't understand their context. So it was just an interesting to see in different places around Brazil what the problems were. Some were similar and some were different. And during the workshop, on the first one, and this is one of the case studies were captured in the Design Transitions book, someone from the government, first of all, I did a design thinking talk in a supermarket, in a shopping mall, and I did that again as well. Somehow shopping malls and design thinking were going together in Brazil. Don't know why. But someone kind of put their hand up and said, oh, we're having this, can I come along? We've got this design thinking process in the government. I was like, huh? This is interesting. So they came along to the workshop, and afterwards they said, do you want to come and see one of our social innovation projects that is a result of our design thinking process that we've built ourselves. So they had been getting education from different types of jams, they had been going to different types of educational facilities they had been getting their skills from, but they were doing it themselves, and they were just a small group inside the government. So they said, come along and see it, and they didn't say where it was. So I said, yes, I'll come. And it was in a Brazilian jail. And I was like, okay. So they picked me up in this black car and took me to this location. And there was actually, you don't see this, but there was lots of press because it was kind of a first way. Their question for this project was how do you kind of regenerate the pathways in Brazil? And they were using the prisoners to kind of put new trees down. For me, it was interesting when I was talking what the actual social value of this was. And the social value was that the prisoners were teaching each other. And they were really, really appreciating that learning. And that gave them kind of some pride while they were inside the jail. And so this was, even though it was like planting pathways, it seems a very simple project. But in the government, they had to just test it and start small and see what happens, really, because of all the politics that would go on. And I think one of the quotes in the book, I have to get this right because I always get this wrong. If you said, so in this government context, even if we are wrong, we tell ourselves that we're right. And from a design thinking mindset, that was like, yeah, you guys are strange. So yeah, that was the lasting kind of quote that I got from exploring with them. So this stage of the walkabout, from being in Brazil, it got to see everything as a prototype, because I would see Brazil as a prototype on a prototype on a prototype, because everyone's doing for themselves because of sometimes the lack of infrastructure that's there. It causes a lot of chaos, but also it helps you kind of experiment and have that freedom of exploring. And it's also, I realised from my Portuguese teacher, I did take Portuguese classes, that she was saying it's called jeitinho, which is this informal feeling free and creative to do what you want, but actually it can hold you back. So it's actually knowing when to kind of prototype and when to actually plan. And I think that's a tricky situation when the mindset's always prototyping. And one of the workshops in Recife, we had, I always like to get all of the workshop materials the night before, or at least have the room arranged, because sometimes it can take some time, especially if we're drawing out all of the tools. And it was coming up to the workshop time, and I said, where's the materials? And they said, Emma, if they're not here, we go to the beach. I was like, okay, that sounds good, a good plan. But then we had to kind of follow through during the workshop to kind of draw the tools as we were going. So we were prototyping really fast to try and get everything going and moving. And I think a big part of my learning is, so people in the government didn't call it design and what they were doing. They were calling it kind of co-participatory design inside the government, or co-creation. It wasn't called design. So I think important learning is to allow partners to find their own language of design and how they want to use it. Because everyone, as I found out in the Design Transitions book, when I was in Brazil, I also went to Fiat, and we captured Nova Base in Portugal, these IT companies and how they're changing. They're using design for different reasons, and you've just got to help them facilitate that. And so I would say, if you apply in design research in a social context, from my experience there, is that it is about helping others and educating them to uncover insights, and also letting them to apply these insights in their context. And you're helping them to do that, but allow them to apply it. So this is the last one, and I don't have a pointer, but this is idiom. And has anyone heard of idiom before? Okay. Um, Obviously, they're in the emerging markets and in India, and Idiom just have this capacity to build new supermarkets. New, they literally have this such a quick process because they've got architects, they've got the whole team under one roof. I think when I was with them, about 120 people, and they can just deliver and work alongside entrepreneurs, and I think that's what makes them quite special, is that they're learning constantly from the entrepreneurs that they're working from. And when I was there, I went there because Dreaming was one of their projects, and I'll talk about that after I talk about their work. So this is the food hall, and this is actually across the road from where I was staying. And this is one of their projects, and it was just they had designed the whole experience inside from the brand right to the store. And they can do this really at a quick, they call it mind to market, their process, very business focused. And also, what was interesting for me, they designed an educational school, which was or redesigned it, which was the Welland Car Education, and they called it the We School. They rebranded it as the We School. This is a management educational place, a university, and Sonia Manchenda, who leads Idiom, alongside a couple of others, she had developed their design thinking approach into their curriculum. And so when I went along to talk with them, it was just fascinating to understand that this was an educational school in management. They were design thinkers and they were strategists. And Dreaming was a project that captured their kind of dreams around, did a map through India and captured all of these kind of dreams. And they actually used, in this context, again, it was education, they were using all of the universities around and training people to capture people's dreams and then bring all the ideas, filter the ideas down and help other people inside of India become entrepreneurs and start their dreams. And it was a young age they were trying to do this, so under 25s, to try and build more entrepreneurs. So learning from there is always recognise people's aspirations, and especially in emerging markets, because their aspirations are really they want to be kind of like the West, but still stay like they are. And I would say the need to articulate outcomes is really important for them. And for India, so I said before, I was searching for where I was adding value, but in this context, Idiom can prove the outcomes that they're having. Because 8 out of 10 startups that they work with are successful. And they were embedding design into other areas. For me, I think they had created this whole system where they were shifting the venture capital model, really. Because I was in Chile when I was in Brazil. I went over to Startup Chile, and I saw in Startup Chile there was this big launch event, and someone was actually just designing a cat website. The government had funded someone to design a cat website, and I was like, "There's funding a cat website? That makes no sense. It doesn't have any social value, or probably has a lot of business value." It was very short-term thinking. And they also, I think it's important that for Dreaming, they shifted the conversation from needs to dreams. So yeah, the book is now out, and it's got 42 stories from around the world of how design's changing. And we're really lucky to get Tim Brown to kind of write a nice foreword for us. I have a copy here if you do want to have a look through. And this was kind of the global map of where we captured all of the stories. So I was in these countries capturing the local stories, and obviously the two co-authors were looking and exploring. So this was the key transitions of where design's changing. Doing more with less. We have these expanding roles. We're greater collaboration in what we do. We're diversifying our business models, and we're externalizing approaches and demonstrating value. So I'll just kind of finish, because I know we're getting short on time. And what I'll say is, if you look at who design research is now, What I'll say is that we are kind of growing up. We're working with these other people. We're still drawing from other worlds, and our practices are still evolving. We're educating other people. We're learning the language. You've got Fjord and Essentia kind of coming together. These worlds are coming together, but we're adding people into the business side and bringing people in business together. And I think it's really important for the potential of where we're going forward, that anyone for design research, I think it's just so important that in a globally expanding world and all the cultures changing, we really do need to have people that understand these systems and that they live in, because that's what we're designing for. I would say a proven future is interdisciplinary, and PhDs, I would say at the moment, there's PhDs inside of Frog, there's PhDs inside of Engine, and there's a justification of design happening with AHRC funding, now funding people inside of Policy Lab in the UK, and looking at justifying that what actually happens and from the start of bringing design into government in the UK. A preferable future is one that's value driven. Look at who you can exchange value with and how you do that, and look at who do you collaborate with, and don't do it for the money, do it for the value that you have. Intrinsically motivated, I would say a lot of these different fields are where they're merging. They're doing it for their own reasons, so I think that is plausible, and that will still continue to happen, and they'll still develop their methodologies in their context. And a possible future is this collaborative networks, like what I saw in Idiom and Dreaming. Like, we don't know what's actually going to happen, really. But I would say we're doing this, and the reason why we'll do these collaborative networks in the future is to solve complex problems, and how we do that is through prototyping and sharing skills. So that's it really. I kind of want to throw that question, if there's any time for questions, over to what would the future of design research look like for you? I don't know. Probably is not.
Yeah, no, we'll have time for first for an applause.